binge eating, eating beyond your own best judgment, is a panicked response. Being able to extinguish a craving is the best way to eat healthy. Even if I was dealt a bad hand, does that mean I should play it as badly as possible? Does that mean I should get as fat as possible just because it's easier for me to get fat? I think a big part of the problem is that we didn't have Pop-Tarts and pizza on the Savannah.
What are some other practical strategies that people can implement to help immediately gain control over cravings?
If your primary goal is to stop overeating and you don't have any health emergencies and you don't have to get to the ideal healthy diet immediately, then I would suggest
Dr. Livingston, welcome.
thank you for having me, Jessica. I've been looking forward to it, and please call me Glenn.
Glenn, absolutely. Glenn, you were once obese. I would like to first talk about everything that you did wrong trying to lose the weight.
Okay. Well, on a practical level, I was not focused enough on getting rid of a lot of processed foods. I was trying to count calories and exercise them off. In retrospect, I probably had exercise bulimia. But, I come from a family of 17 psychotherapists. When something would break in the house, we all asked it how it felt, and nobody could fix it. And so I thought this was a deeply psychological problem. I was, if I could fill that hole in my heart, then I wouldn't have to keep trying to fill that hole in my stomach. And I went to the best psychologists. I went to eating disorder specialists. I went to Overeaters Anonymous. I had a spiritual journey. Went to psychiatrists. I took medication. I went to nutritionists and dietitians. And I would get a little thinner and a lot fatter, a little thinner and a lot fatter. I don't regret the journey because it was a very soulful journey that fostered a lot of self-compassion and understanding and ability to connect with people, but it didn't help me with the food.
Now, when you were seeing these different professionals, what was it exactly that they were prescribing to you? Was it diet changes? Was it exercise? Was it certain diets?
They were mostly psychological professionals. I had actually married a marketer, and my best friend from high school was the vice president of Atkins Nutritionals in marketing. And so they were both, and my ex-wife had grown up in a deli, so they were really heavy on the Atkins diet. And I lost a little weight on that. I didn't feel that healthy, but I lost a little weight on it. So I did that for a while. What really helped me was the whole foods plant-based diet when I eventually got there. But I mean, what I have to talk about today is less diet specific and more thinking specific. I work with people on all different diets. I say my program is diet agnostic to let them recover on the diet of their choice. But so they were prescribing those types of things. There was an anxiety medication for a little while. There was an antidepressant for a little while. Not that long. I didn't take the medication for that long. That wasn't really working. What worked was when I changed my paradigm. It took me about 20 years to get there, but I had been simultaneously with my clinical practice, I'd been consulting for big food and big pharma, mostly big food. And I was on the wrong side of the war. I was helping to sell things that I wish I never helped to sell. But
Like what?
I mean, like sugar to kids, like acrylamides and hyper palatable concentrations of starch and sugar and excitotoxins and salt that were all wrapped up and packaged in a way that would let the advertising industry make people believe that they really needed it to survive. This is where the good stuff was, and people think advertising doesn't affect them, but it affects you more when you think that because your sales resistance is down. And I saw.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Greenwashed processed foods, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good way to say it. And I saw how many millions of dollars they were spending on this. I knew that they were targeting, this was key, they were targeting the reptilian brain. They wanted to hit the bliss point in the reptilian brain, that seat of the feast or famine response, that survival response, without giving you enough nutrition to feel satisfied. So they'd make you feel really happy, but they wouldn't give you enough nutrition to feel satisfied. And the result was that just hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt. Like you just keep looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container. And that was paradigm changing for me. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner, but I realized it had nothing to do with my personal history. Like it didn't matter that I was in a bad marriage. It didn't matter that I had a difficult upbringing in some ways. Um, it was a very pernicious reptilian brain response where I felt like I couldn't stop eating. Um, and eventually, when I realized that this reptilian brain doesn't know love, right? I'm trying to love myself thin, thinking that food addiction had to do with not being loved enough. But then I realized the reptilian brain doesn't really know love. The reptilian brain, if this is the reptilian brain, it looks at something in the environment and it says, do I eat it? Do I mate with it? Or do I kill it? Eat, mate, or kill. There's no love there. Love comes from the higher structures or the later evolved structures. Like, the mammalian brain says, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact will that have on the people that you love in your tribe and your family? And then the neocortex says above that, wait, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact does that have on your longer term goals, on your higher aspirations, on your, you know, on weight loss, on diet, on fitness goals, but also spirituality and art and music and work and contribution. Everything that we think of as so valuable in a human society, that's really up here. This thing down here is what says, just hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt. I'm going to turn off the phone. I turned it on when we were having a little bit of connected difficulty and I don't want it to interrupt us. I'm sorry. Um, so I said, I'm going to need a different paradigm. This thing doesn't know love. I'm going to have to take control of this thing the same way that I would take control of other organs in my body. So, for example, my bladder could be generating a very powerful urge to pee right now. It's not, but it could be, right? And if it were, I would say, I'm talking to Jessica. I've got this important conversation to have. We can't take care of that right now, but I'll take care of it, in an hour when the interview is done, because I'm a civilized person and I have other responsibilities in the world, and I'm in control, not my bladder. And so um, I started to think I needed to take the same level of control with this reptilian feast or famine response. I needed to figure out a way to wake up when it was active. And so I flipped my paradigm and I started to I would make a rule, like a really clear line in the sand, so that I would know when it was about to ask me to cross it. So one of my first rules was I'll never have chocolate on a weekday again, only ever have it on Saturdays after a workout, right? Um, and then if I was at a coffee shop and there was a big old chocolate bar at the counter calling to me, and I heard this voice in my head that says, you know what, Glenn? You worked out hard enough. It doesn't matter that it's Wednesday. Forget about your silly rule. You can start your diet again tomorrow. Go ahead and have a little bit. It's not going to hurt you. Yippee. Let's get some. And I would say, wait a minute. Whoa, that's not me. That's my reptilian brain. You could call it your food monster. That's my food monster, and it's moaning for monster mush. I don't eat monster mush. I don't let monsters tell me what to do. Like I would have this really primitive reaction. And that wasn't a miracle. I was almost 300 pounds at the time when this started. It wasn't a miracle in the sense that it fixed everything right away, but it was a miracle in the sense that it eliminated the confusion. It kind of like opened up the space between stimulus and response where I could make better decisions if I wanted to. I didn't always choose to do that, but I could choose to do that. And it didn't seem like some mysterious force, like some deep psychological trauma or some, mysterious disease that I had that no one could really explain where it comes from. It just seemed like a bad habit which was automated and I had to de-automate it. Um, and so slowly but surely, I would start to look at what my food master was saying in that space, and I'd figure out what was wrong with it. So, for example, it's not just as easy to start your diet tomorrow. The way that the brain works is a principle called neuroplasticity, which means that if you have a craving and you indulge that craving, thinking I'll just start again tomorrow, you will have reinforced the craving and you will have reinforced the thought. So you're going to have a deeper craving for chocolate tomorrow, and you're going to be more likely to say, I'll just start tomorrow. So if you're in a hole, you got to stop digging. Always use the present moment to be healthy, right? So I would call that an example of a rational refutation, where I would examine what my food monster was saying in that space between stimulus and response, and I'd figure out what was wrong with it. This was a very private thing. I was not going to teach this. This was just me feeling desperate to figure out how to, stop overeating myself. And it took me a couple of years to really work through all the crazy things that my food monster was saying and what was wrong with them. It used to like to tell me that obesity was genetic, and so I'm doomed. And I would have to say that, well, obesity is genetic, but less than half the variance is accounted for by genetics. Diet and lifestyle are more important. Um, and besides, even if I was dealt a bad hand, does that mean I should play it as badly as possible? Does that mean I should get as fat as possible just because it's easier for me to get fat? It's not true. I shouldn't do that. So I had this whole list of things that my food monster was saying, and this whole list of reasons why it was wrong. Um, Slowly but surely, that space got a little bigger. Those excuses went away. And for me, that was enough. For me, I got better over the course of several years keeping a journal, me versus my food monster. When I was getting divorced in 2015, I realized I was going to have to do something different with my career. And I'd had the consulting career and I had the clinical career. And as part of the business consulting, I wind up as a minor partner in a publishing company. And I called the owner, the CEO, and I said, I need to do something different. I'm thinking about writing a book. And he said, what would the book be about? And I said, well, I have this crazy journal that I kept between me and my food monster. I think I'm going to turn it into a book. He says, do it. I love it. Because we need to publish a book and show other authors that we know what we're doing with marketing so we can attract more valuable authors. So I took a couple of months and I showed him a draft of the book. And he turns around and he says, Glenn, I, I don't eat donuts. Donuts are monster mush. I don't let monsters tell me what to do. We use different words back then, by the way, but they're a little bit offensive because we were up until the point I showed it to him, I was not planning on marketing it. And so he calls me back, says that he really likes this. He proceeds to lose about 90 pounds. So now we have two people that it was really working for. We published the book, and we both know what we were doing in marketing, but we had no idea how it was going to take off. And we wound up with 2 million readers. I got a gig on Psychology Today blogging for them about it, and we got another million readers there. This turns into a little coaching agency. And over the course of the next 8 years, I wind up working with over 2,000 people, myself and about 10 coaches that worked with us, and my ex-partner.
I want to pause there for one moment. One of the things in the book that seemed to help him and countless others, was it perhaps how you talk to your body? Because you mentioned, if you had to do something while you're having this conversation with me, you would just kind of reassure your body, now's not the time. Is that one of the tools really that helped you?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
I found it's funny because I've learned that I don't know where it came from because I didn't always do that, but talking to my body helps me a lot when I feel hunger, and I just reassure myself, I hear you. I will feed you soon.
That's really important what you're saying. And the reason for it is that overeating, binge eating, eating beyond your own best judgment is a panicked response. It's the reptilian brain feeling a certain amount of organismic distress, like I don't have what I need right now. This is an emergency. You're going to die if you don't get something to eat. I know that sounds crazy, but talk to 2,000 people and watch how they eat, and then you won't think that's so crazy anymore. Your brain thinks that it's keeping you alive by overeating and binging. And so when you can take a breath, that there are essentially two nervous systems in the body. There's something called the sympathetic nervous system, which is the part that gets all revved up and scared. That's the part that would run away from a hungry tiger or if there was a predator chasing after you, it would mount an emergency response and take care of it right now. It's also the part of you that says we need more resources. There's danger in the environment. We have to get resources now. And in our modern food environment, that's death, because I could go downstairs and get 100,000 calories for $100, no problem whatsoever. So when you can calm yourself down, there are a number of ways to do that. One is by talking to yourself, like your body, like a little girl. I hear you. I know you need something. I'm going to take care of it. You're not going to go hungry, right? You're not going to. One of them is doing that. Another one would be what we call parasympathetic breathing. That's the other nervous system. That's the nervous system that says everything's okay. You can rest and digest. There is no danger. Just chill. That's that's when you can use your rational brain. When your lower brain is in a panic, you can't use your rational brain. And that's why all your best thinking goes out the window. That's why people feel like, they could read a whole diet book over the weekend and totally believe in it and make all the plans and get all the inventory. And then it's 2 o'clock and they're at the donut store and they don't know why they're sitting in the back of the parking lot chowing down on the donuts, right? Um, it's because of that panicked response. And so you could breathe in for shorter than you breathe out. If you count to 7 while you breathe in and count to 11 when you breathe out, Laurie Hammond calls them 7-11 breaths, you're going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you that says, there's no danger here.
How
So if you,
many times do you need to do that breath?
one time will help, 3 times is better.
Okay.
Um, the reason that works, it's the opposite of how you would be breathing if you were running away from a hungry tiger. You'd be going, right? So if
Mhm.
you have time to breathe out for longer than you breathe in, then obviously there is no emergency, and suddenly it's possible to think rationally again. Um, Other things that will help you to continue to think rationally. I didn't figure out this part of the equation until after I was better. I'm a very rational person. Like I was trained in a scientist practitioner program, so I reasoned my way out of this, but most people can't solely reason their way out of it. They have to attend to all this other self-regulation. So there's the breathing, there's the talking to yourself like a nurturing mother, or father, but there's also actually feeding yourself. If you're well nourished, if you're eating, 3 nourishing meals per day, if you're not trying to lose weight too quickly, if you're going at a pound or two a week and not trying to crash diet or anything like that, then you're less likely to send your brain into a panic. If you're well hydrated, you're less likely to send your brain into a panic. If you're well slept, well rested, like all of the things that we need as human beings to take care of ourselves, um, it's kind of a unitary whole. Like I can give you some tricks, I can give you some techniques to do, but they're only going to get you started. What you're going to discover is if you ignore these other elements of self-regulation, eventually you're going to say, oh, screw it, just do it. I don't care. I don't have any good reasons. I got rid of all my excuses, but oh well, what the hell? I'll start again tomorrow anyway, right? Because your rational brain's going to go offline. So and that was the second part of the equation, and that's the reason I wound up writing the last book. I've actually written 8 books on overeating. The last book is called The Future Cravings, and it incorporates the interplay between the rational disempowerment, finding the pernicious logic and getting rid of those excuses, and the self-regulation. It also incorporates the way that cravings are formed and the way that they're extinguished, because there are a lot of common misconceptions about that cause people to make mistakes. We can talk about that, or I'm going to pause for a second in case you have any questions, and then we can go where you
Yes,
want to go.
so I do want to clarify, is there a happy medium between eating well and staying well fed, but then also not overeating and eating because you're in that reptilian brain mode? Because I do know that, or at least I've heard from other experts that your body will go into like a feast or famine. And if you do starve it, then it's going to hold on to the food, and because it's going to think, well, we don't know when you're going to feed us again. So
Exactly.
isn't there's got to be, but then you don't want to overeat. You don't want to constantly be in that stress state thinking if you don't eat right now, then you're going to die. So how do
Mhm.
you measure what the right,
Well,
amount of food?
it's different for most people, and it kind of depends upon their habits and their dietary belief systems. Usually for about 6 months, I like people to have 3 meals a day. I know people really believe in intermittent fasting, and I've done a lot of interviews with the, host of the intermittent fasting podcast. Um, and I believe in it also, but you have to get a lot of the junk out of your system, and you have to get the binging habits out of your system first, because you can trigger that feast and famine response if you get into intermittent fasting too quickly. That's what I found. So your question was, what's the happy medium? We usually try to avoid overwhelming people at first. We ask them to choose one simple rule. So a lot of times it's not even a food regulation rule. Like I gave you the chocolate regulation rule, but a lot of times it's something like, oh, this truck driver that said he's got to eat fast food 3 times a day. But he says, I'll tell you what, I won't go back for seconds. And he could do that. It was a small enough thing that he could actually do that. And day in and day out, he didn't go back for seconds. And he saw himself not going back for seconds, and his identity function was triggered. Maybe I can do something about this eating problem. I seem to be a person who doesn't go back for seconds. I wonder what else a person who doesn't go back for seconds does. And then, you know, if he was aiming towards being a whole foods plant-based person, then he would say, well, what processed foods could I eliminate here? Maybe I will only have ice cream once per calendar week, and only, 2 scoops or something like that. So we tend to start people slowly, tend to define very specific conditions where they indulge when they want to, so that it doesn't become an emotional thing. It becomes a very well thought out intellectual effort. And yes, we're looking for a happy medium. I believe we're meant to enjoy food. I just don't think. I think a big part of the problem is that we didn't have Pop-Tarts and pizza on the savannah, and so we're not evolutionarily prepared to push those buttons with frequency. Um, so we have to be careful with that. Did I answer your question?
You did, and I want to go a little bit deeper into diet just for a moment because you said with the people that you work with and who read your book, it's not about diet, so it's not about carnivore, vegan, vegetarian, low carb, high protein, low fat, whatever it is. It's more so about what works for them. But would you say overall there are general rules as far as you just mentioned pizza and Pop Tarts? Should everyone eliminate processed foods,
I, I,
dairy, for instance, or what? Yeah, what are the rules?
in terms of eliminating, use Mr. Lips and Mr. Tongue. In terms of eliminating overeating, the less processed food you have, the better. Most people don't want to completely eliminate it, but if you have a general principle in mind that processed food begets cravings for processed food, that there are chemicals in a lot of processed food that turn off your ability to know when you're hungry and full. So people talk about just eating mindfully, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. That's great, but that works in an environment where your hormones are functioning well and you're not dealing with a lot of the tricks and manipulations of the big food industry, who are really, you know, try not to get sued, but it's like a bunch of fat cats in white suits with mustaches laughing all the way to the bank. They don't really have your health in mind. They really don't.
Mm.
And we could talk about what those tricks are and some of the things that they do to fool your hungry and full meters. But the question is, um, generally, dietarily, do I have advice? I've seen that the less processed food people eat, the more successful they are in our program. I've seen that people who try to starve themselves and lose weight quickly are not successful in the program. The reason is that you're telling the brain that as soon as food is available, you're going to have to hoard it. And so we want to, I say, flood your body with nutrition, whatever that means to you, but flood it with nutrition at a slight caloric deficit so that you don't send your brain into a panic. And Doug Graham taught me that direction was much more important than speed. I really believe that, unless the doctor says it's an emergency that you have to lose weight. So I've also seen people have less success on the extreme diets. Um, so people that are on a completely no fruit and vegetable diet just live on meat alone. It's doable, but maybe at about half the success rate that I've seen, because they wind up with these cravings for carbohydrates eventually. People that do extremely low carb um, don't do quite as well as people that do just, moderately low carb paleo or something like that. Um, People that try to do completely raw vegan, or just live on fruit and greens, they don't do as well as people that are, like following Dr. Furman or just having a whole foods plant-based with substantial food in it. So um, if your primary goal is to stop overeating and you don't have any health emergencies and you don't have to get to the ideal healthy diet immediately, then I would suggest eliminate as many processed foods as you can bear. Um, Eat plenty, you know, maybe for a few weeks just to get the hang of it. Tally up your nutrition in one of the online calculators and make sure that you're not at too much of a caloric deficit. And and breathe and breathe, because panicking about weight loss is another way to set the brain into a overeating and binging mode. Like that's why I call the program the backdoor to weight loss, because I don't want you to focus on weight loss per se. Most of our clients lose weight, and usually a significant amount, but I don't want that to be the focus or the premise, because I find that you get all caught up with the diet mentality, and then it causes the problem that you're trying to solve in the first place. So,
After going through quite the diet journey myself, not to lose weight necessarily, but to clear my skin. I had severe skin issues and I just became obsessed with being as healthy as possible. So I did the raw vegan thing, and then my body sort of wanted to swing the pendulum the other way, I think, and compensate for, that year that I didn't eat any meat or any animal anything. So then I almost went completely carnivore. And I just want to put my stamp of approval on everything you just said, because I think for the 99% of the people out there, there's going to be some balance of everything. It might be, 60% or 65% more of carbs or meat versus, someone else. But it seems from everything I've learned that everyone needs a little bit of everything minus the processed foods.
sugar, flour, alcohol, and salt are the primary
Yeah.
culprits that create the cravings. And the less of those things you have, the easier it's going to be for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would
And
go ahead.
believe it or not, I don't think there's a doctor out there, no one's contacted me yet, who's going to diagnose you with a sugar and flour deficiency. I don't think there's any real nutritional need for, white sugar and flour in the diet. So someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I've not heard a doctor diagnose them with a sugar and flour deficiency.
Absolutely. I would actually love to go into marketing. I think it would be very helpful for people, because once you do become aware of it more, then you know kind of what to look out for. I actually have a degree in marketing. I
Well,
remember I remember when before I even went to school for it, and I heard this recording of someone talking about it, and it was basically explaining, I didn't even know what marketing was, and it was explaining it how, when they're coming up with a new ad for something, they pick the color, they pick the people, they pick the music, and the smiles and everything, and then they decide, okay, what are we going to sell? It's like that's the last key, like it doesn't matter. It's like what feeling are
yeah,
you selling? What colors does that relate? Like everything else, and then you just put the product there.
it's a very powerful way of influencing people, but there's more going on than that. So for example, look at the packaging of certain food bars. I remember the VP of a big food bar company telling me, he told me this as he was leaving the company, that they took the vitamins out of the bar to save a little money, and they focused on making the packaging very multicolored and vibrant and shiny instead.
Wow.
And if you think about it, in nature, if you encounter a rainbow, a field of like blueberries or green lettuce or red tomatoes or yellow carrots, and you eat the rainbow, you're getting a diversity of micronutrients. So we're evolutionarily prepared to respond to that. But in this case, it was kind of predatory because they were soliciting that response, but they weren't giving you the nutrition that it was promising, right? There's also a lot of use of plausible deniability. So, these potato chips are made with avocado oil, you see, and so therefore they're good for you. Ignoring the fact that every study ever done on heated oil suggests that it's carcinogenic, ignoring the fact that when you heat potato chips to a certain level, you form acrylamides, which are also carcinogenic, and ignoring the fact that virtually everybody knows there's not much nutrition in potato chips, right? But see, your reptilian brain doesn't care about all that stuff. It just wants enough information to get the rational brain out of the way. So we can say, oh, this is good for me. Look, it's got avocado oil now, right? So that's plausible deniability, and it's rampant. It's not just in the chip industry. If I were to stay in the chip industry for a moment, there are also other ways that the companies prey on the variety response. Um, in nature, if you were to come across a field of vegetables or other types of foods, and there was a variation in taste among them, you'd be more likely to keep eating because you'd be more likely to find a variety of micronutrients. Well, you can take advantage of that as a food manufacturer when you're making potato chips, for example, by not making them on a unitary assembly line, but on a half a dozen assembly lines with very slight variations in flavors. So that as you're eating the chips, you get that variation sensation and you keep eating due to the variety response. So they're just thing after thing after thing like that, where um, it's they have an unfair advantage. They have a lot of science on their side. And as the years go by, the food gets more and more addictive. You know, um, the chips well, I'm older than you, but the chips that I ate when I was a kid are different than the chips that we're eating today. It's more addictive than it ever was. So the less processed foods you can have, the better. The less processed foods you can have, the better. Yeah.
Mhm. We talked about one of the things in your book that you explain to people is talking to your body. What are some other practical strategies that people can implement to help immediately gain control over cravings?
Okay. So I'm going to give you a specific technique. Then I'm going to give you a theoretical framework so you understand what cravings are and how they work, because most people don't. Um, the specific technique is easier to describe. I want you to come up with one simple rule, something that you could and would do that wouldn't be too onerous, but would make you feel like you're moving in the right direction. Simple rules are better than big rules to start, because what most people do is they get their motivation up and they read a book or two, or they have a coaching session, and then they've got their mojo and they're willing to do whatever they planned on doing for a couple of days. But one day they wake up without their mojo and the bar is too high. If you start with something lower, if you start with a lower bar and you jump over it day after day after day, you trigger your identity function and you start to feel like a winner, and you'll start asking yourself, what else could I do? So you get some momentum and you want to get that rolling. So examples could be, I told you about the truck driver. It might also be, I always put my fork down between bites. It could be that I'll never eat in front of a screen again, or maybe I'll stop eating at 8 o'clock. Maybe it's that I write down what I'm going to eat before I eat it. I don't have any restrictions on what I'm going to eat, but I always write it down, or I take a picture of it before I eat it. Just a little awareness device that would make a difference. Take a little time and come up with that one simple rule, and then start listening for that part of you that wants you to break it. See, when you have a rule, it functions like a tripwire and it divides your thoughts into healthy versus unhealthy with regards to food. Anything that suggests you're going to follow your rule, you define as healthy. And anything that suggests you're going to break the rule, you define as unhealthy. To make it even simpler, anything that suggests you're going to stick with the rule is you. Anything that suggests you're going to break it is your food monster or your inner food demon, or whatever you want to call it. Okay. Start listening for the thoughts that suggest, thoughts, feelings, images that suggest you're going to break this rule. We want that to happen. There's nothing wrong with you if that happens. This is how it works. When you hear that, you know, oh, a little bit won't hurt, right? Just a little won't hurt. You say, wait a minute, that thing is waking up. You know, this reptilian brain is waking up. What am I going to do? I don't want that thing to take charge. So at that point, you take a 7-11 a breath, maybe 3 of them if you can get yourself to do it. You breathe in for a count of 7 and out for a count of 11. I'm not doing it because it takes a long time to do.
Mhm.
Um, and then you say, why does my food monster want me to give up on my goals and dreams and break this rule? And step back and listen to see what your food monster is saying. It says, just a little won't hurt. Then you take another 7-11 breath because it excites the reptilian brain a little bit that you're listening to it. So you want to calm down again. And then you say, why is it wrong? The food monster usually wins with a half truth and a bigger lie. And so we can acknowledge the truth. Yeah, a little wouldn't hurt if it was really just going to be a little, but it's never just a little, is it? Right? One bite turns into the next, into the next, into the next. And also, one bite off my plan, one bite in defiance of my rule is the difference between who's in charge, me or you, Mr. Food Monster. And I would like to be the master rather than the slave. So you define for yourself what's wrong with what your food monster is saying. And it's okay to acknowledge what part of it is true. Then you take another 7-11 breath because we're letting the food monster talk again. And then you ask yourself, what would make me a happier or better person if I stuck with my rule right now? It's very tempting to do what my food monster is saying, but what if I stuck with it? What would make me a happier or better person? For me personally, it's usually something like, well, I can walk in the world as a tall, confident, thin leader, free of digestive distress, free of cardiovascular worries or worries about diabetes and kidney disease. I can climb mountains until I'm in my 90s. I can, do all the things that a healthy man really gets to do. Um, Once you've gone through that procedure, you've taught yourself to set up a tripwire, open up the space between stimulus and response, to talk to yourself with loving kindness and get yourself into a calmer, more rational state, to disempower what your food monster says, and then to link staying with the plan to the reasons you set it up in the first place. That has a tremendous impact. Just that technique alone has a tremendous impact. So that's the real takeaway I want people to get from this. Do you want to ask any questions about that? Because then I want to talk to you about cravings and if I have time.
Keep going. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then on a practical basis, I want you to understand what cravings are, how they're formed, and how they're extinguished. Because being able to extinguish a craving is the best way to eat healthy. Like if you didn't want to eat unhealthy, it would be really easy to eat healthy, right? Well, you can actually make that happen. You can actually do that. Um, the first thing you need to know is that cravings are not a sign that something's wrong. They're actually a sign of a healthy mind working in a sick food environment, right? 100,000 years ago, the people who had the cravings were the ones that survived because they had to be motivated to go find foods. They would look for food signals, things that would reliably lead them to food. They had to get excited. It took a lot of energy. They had to hunt. They had to gather, and they they um, they would survive because they had that motivation. The people that didn't have the cravings had a survival disadvantage. So cravings are a sign of a healthy mind, not a sick mind. That's the first thing you need to know. Unfortunately, it works against us in the modern food environment because we live in a very sick society. Um, Jakarta Krishnamurti said it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And that's nowhere is that more true than with food. Um, so, okay, 100,000 years ago, suppose there's a caveman and his name is Thag, Thag, just because I like the name. And Thag sees a monkey and he says, oh, last time that monkey led me to a banana tree. So he follows the monkey and lo and behold, he gets to a banana tree and he gorges himself on bananas and takes them back to his family. That's a survival advantage. So now Thag's brain secretes a bunch of dopamine the next time he sees the monkey, essentially to say, you better follow that monkey. I'll let you be happy as long as you're following that monkey. That's called a food signal or food stimulus. The monkey is. And it's important to know that the craving emerges in response to the signal, not necessarily in response to the food, right? It's not when he gets to the banana tree, it's when he sees the monkey that he's excited, because that's the behavior that our brains wanted to motivate us to do. Now, suppose the season goes on a little bit and there's a tree that the monkey takes him to that is empty because there have been too many other monkeys there. The season is too late. Most people think at that point, the craving would start to go down, like go down in a linear way, like day by day by day, because the signal doesn't work. That's not really what happens. And this is where people make big mistakes because they're expecting things to go down like this. And what actually happens is at this point, Thag's going to get a bigger craving to follow monkeys than he ever had before. If you're trying to extinguish donuts or something and you don't go to the donut store and you don't go to the donut store, and then 4 or 5 days into it, you have the worst craving for donuts you've ever had, you're likely to say to yourself, oh my God, this is torture. It's going to be torture forever. I might as well just give in. Turns out that's the worst thing you can do. Here's why. This is called an extinction burst. And so the way the curve will really work as the craving is extinguished is you'll have a worse craving than you ever had, and then it'll start to go down linearly, and then there'll be a couple of bumps somewhere around the 25 to 30-day mark. And then your brain will label the craving as dormant. It won't erase it. It will always remember it if you go back to it, but it will stop bothering you with it. Okay. Why
That's
does,
fascinating.
I'm sorry?
That's fascinating.
No, it is, this was a big learning for me. So why does this happen? Why does this
Mhm.
extinction burst happen? It happens because finding a monkey in a scarce food environment that leads you to bananas 50% of the time is much better than having no monkeys at all. As a matter of fact, in a scarce food environment, finding a monkey that led you bananas 10% of the time would be better than having no monkeys at all. So your brain is testing to see if the reward has become intermittently available at random. And it turns out, if you look at the behavioral literature, intermittent random reinforcement is the most powerful reinforcement schedule we know about. This is why people get stuck at slot machines in Las Vegas. You ever see those little ladies pulling the machine at Las Vegas? Got to be there, got to be there, got to be there. Don't know when it's going to pay off. Is this making sense? Yeah. That's why they're there, because
Yes, definitely.
the machines are set to pay off intermittently at random. And your brain wants to hold on to that signal for reinforcement. And so here's what you want to do on a practical level. When you get that incredible craving, I'll call it the where the frick is my banana craving. Jessica, are you still there? You're frozen now. Oh no, that's sad.
Yes, yes, you
Okay,
froze for a moment.
okay,
I think we're okay. I can still hear you.
okay, good. Now you're back. The brain is saying, where the frick are my bananas? Monkeys lead to bananas. Where the frick are my bananas? It's having a little temper tantrum. And you just want to say, this is expected. Bring it on. This is what's supposed to happen. You can also plan for it. You can also take care of the rest of your self-regulation. You can talk to yourself more kindly. You can drink a little more water. You can get a little more sleep. You can surround yourself more with people so you don't feel isolated. So your brain knows that it's okay to go through this. You're not actually going to starve. Um, just push through. You're expected, just push through. Don't reward the craving at random, because then you're just telling the brain it's doing the right thing. And then watch the craving go down over the next couple of weeks and be prepared for a couple of more little bumps. The other thing you want to avoid is when people get down to the lower end of the extinction curve, they tend to say, I got this. I don't have that addiction anymore. I can handle it. And then they reinforce it at random. They give it a chance. Maybe I could just have a donut, right? And now they've taught their brain that it's available at random, and there you go. The last thing to know is that cravings are specific to food stimuli. A food stimuli could be a monkey, it could be the donut store sign, it could be the hot air and the smell of salt at the beach that triggers you to want ice cream. It could be a feeling, could be an internal feeling, it could be an interaction with someone, it could be a memory, but there's almost always a stimulus that reminds you of the availability of caloric or nutrient-dense resources. And for this reason, let's say I extinguish a donut craving. Let's say I'm having a donut every day on my way home from work, and I say, okay, I'm not going to stop at the donut store anymore. I go through the extinction burst, I get through the 30 days, and lo and behold, I've lost a little weight and I'm not craving donuts anymore. Then about 6 weeks later, my dad invites me over to play poker. And every time I play poker with my dad, there's a big box of donuts on the table. And I get there and I have a worse craving that I've ever had for donuts. Does that mean that I failed at extinguishing the donut craving? It doesn't. I extinguished the donut store and the donut store sign as a signal for donuts. I did not extinguish my dad's place as a signal for donuts. So it's important to recognize that you didn't fail. You just have one more signal to extinguish. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's almost like you're putting out a fire and then there's another fire pops up, but I'm guessing they get easier as each one
They,
shows.
they, they get much easier as each one pops up, and you can plan for them. You can say, you know, before you set out to extinguish the donut craving, you can say, where are all the places that I have eaten donuts before in my life? What are all the signals? And then you might, if I know I'm going to play poker with my dad in 6 weeks, I would, program an email to arrive. I'd schedule it to arrive the day before I get there and say, remember, you're going to have this craving when you get there. I want you to eat a little bit more healthy food in the morning. I want you to get an extra hour of sleep. I want you to do a little journaling and see what your food monster is going to say and have a refutation for it. Let's get prepared. Let's make sure we know what we're doing. Um, and people get scared about this. They say, well, I'm never going to get over it. But as a practical matter, about 80% of the cravings are linked to about 20% of the signals. So you can really get over the bulk of your cravings pretty quickly. That's what I want people to know about cravings. Oh, one more thing. I'll tell you one more thing. Um, when something is particularly delicious and unexpected, it's more likely to form a serious craving, sometimes with one experience. So you kind of have to be on the alert for that and ask yourself, do I want this? Do I want this craving? Sometimes you do. Um, I made this dried, or my friend made this dried portobello mushroom and, you know, organic tomato sauce thing with no salt. And it was so delicious. And I had that experience. I really wanted that because I want to have cravings for that because that would be a good thing for me to have more of. But if you eat something you don't really want to be bothered with a craving for, you need to be careful not to keep it going and to take steps to eradicate it right away. I remember when I was in Overeaters Anonymous, gosh, 30 years ago now, I had a sponsor. I won't tell you his name, but he said we'd be going out to dinner or something, and he'd take a bite of something and go, I can't eat that. That's too good. And Glenn, when it's too good, it's no good. If it's too good, and he didn't understand the whole technical aspect of the cravings curve, but he'd figured out that if it was too good, it was no good because he was going to form a craving pretty quickly. So
That
yeah,
is so good.
yeah. So watch out for that. Use it in your favor, and don't let it get used against you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, such good information, Glenn. What is your number one health tip? So just one piece of advice, whether that is mindset, diet, nutrition, emotional, whatever it is, but one piece of advice you would like the whole world to know.
Start your day with healthy green goodness. Whatever you consider your dietary philosophy, most people can have tender leafy greens. And if you put a half a pound in the blender with some water at minimum, or if you eat bananas or nuts or whatever you consider to be healthy, but start your day with healthy green goodness so that your body knows that the good stuff is available, and it builds a defense against the survival drive being hijacked by all that other stuff. Um, if you do make a mistake, come back to healthy green goodness. Like people who've just binged, they're often very frightened about continuing to binge. And how do you stop? The way that you stop is to take a half a pound of leafy greens, put it in a blender with some water, and drink it down like medicine. Assuming there's no medical reason you can't do that, your survival drive will wake up and say, "Oh, the good stuff is over here." Um, So those are my favorite tips.
Oh, that's great. So just leafy greens by themselves, not mixed with anything?
Well, I mean, my smoothie in the morning, I eat plant-based, so I've got a bunch of bananas and blueberries and sometimes some flax seeds, and I make quite a big blender, and I drink it before my workout, and then I have a little bit afterwards, and my body's just starting out the right way, and it kills a lot of cravings. Um, Also, if you work out hard, make sure that you have something with you to recover with. And the first hour after exercise is kind of critical for refueling your muscles so that you don't have cravings that are too strong. And what that is different with most people. For me, it's whole fruit, about 375 calories. I'll take with me to eat it in the car. Um,
Okay, great. I have one final question for you, but before I ask it, where can people go to learn more? Where can people go to buy the book?
oh, well, the book is free for Kindle, Nook, or PDF if you go to defeatyourcravings.com. Defeatyourcravings.com and click the free reader bonus book, the free reader bonus button, the big blue button. Sign up for the reader bonus list. You'll get that. You'll get a set of food plan starter templates. We develop them for just about a dietary philosophy. So there's low carb, high carb, point counting, calorie counting, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of information here. So I would encourage people to read the book, but I recorded a whole bunch of coaching demonstration sessions so you can see how it works in practice. We talked a lot about it in theory. This is all free. Just go to defeatyourcravings.com and sign up for the free reader bonuses.
Incredible. It's free. Defeat your
It's free.
cravings. Yeah, I will have that in the description, of course. Go grab a copy. Such great information, even in just 1 hour. So I can only imagine. Um, Pick your favorite number, 1 through 100.
Okay.
You have to tell me what it is.
Oh, I thought you were going to do magic on me or something. It's 47.
47.
Mhm.
What's your favorite song and why?
My favorite song. I can't think of the name of it now. It ain't no joke. I
Like a
sing
singing one.
like a wounded moose in heat. Walking on the sun.
Walk in
What?
the Sun. Not Requiem of a Dream.
No, that's not rec. No, it's
Who
walking.
sings it?
See, I told you I'm 60 years old. Um,
No,
okay. Yeah, I should know my favorite song. I'm sorry.
that's okay.
I,
I'm surprised you remember.
I just really groove to it.
Okay,
I
Walking on.
guess walking on the sun. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's Smash Mouth. I think that's the name of the
Okay.
band, which is
All right.
not a great name for a band. Why? Why do you want to know these things?
Why?
Why do you want to know
Why is
these
it?
things?
Oh, it's just a personal question to end the interview with, so that
Okay.
we get, a little taste of the human side of whatever
Oh,
we're
okay.
talking about.
Okay. Well, then I'll tell you that for meditation, I like to juggle 5 balls.
Really?
Yeah, I have to warm up for a while, but yeah, I used to be a juggling psychologist. When the kids would come in to see me, I would teach them how to juggle.
Okay. So, I mean, literally, you're meditating while you're juggling.
Well, juggling is a meditation because you have to be watching all the balls and it has to be in a precise timing
Mhm.
and they otherwise they fall down. And what's really interesting about that, I actually have analogies for overeating. Sometimes people work their program for a while and they get into a groove and they feel like everything's going really well, and then they lose it. And I think that's akin to learning how to juggle a whole bunch of balls. And then all of a sudden, I'll remember that I'm juggling and I'm like, oh, holy crap, what am I doing? And all the balls fall down. And then I can't seem to get it again. I have to go all the way back to one ball and practice the arc where it goes right over the bridge of my nose. And I know exactly the point when it stops going up and starts coming down. And the message for overeaters is that if that happens to you, go back to one simple rule and then build up from there, just like I would build up to 2 balls, 3 balls. And I could do that in an hour. It doesn't have to take forever. With getting back on track with overeating, it takes a couple of days. Go back to one simple rule if you lose it. Um, and then you won't stay lost nearly as long in the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Glenn. Dr. Livingston, Glenn. Check out the description to go get the book, defeatyourcravings.com. Thank you so much for all the value you shared. And if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more from amazing guests like Glenn, please hit the subscribe button and I will see you next week.
Thank you for having me on.